Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Good day and welcome to our podcast. This is CampHacker, episode 107, recorded on the 14th of March, 2018. On today's show, supporting staff mental wellness. If you would like easy, automatic, and free updates of our podcast, you can subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, or most other places you get your favorite podcasts. This week's CampHacker podcast is sponsored in part by camp pros like you who support the show on Patreon. If you've got even one good idea from the CampHacker podcast, you can show your support for the show for as little as $1 per month. That's right, even $1 a month plays a big part in the production of every CampHacker podcast, and it helps us reach camp pros all around the world. For chipping in, you'll get some great rewards too, just like a Kickstarter campaign. Please go to patreon.com/CampHacker. And hey, this month, we wanted to give a special thank you to these patrons who've increased their pledges to help cover the cost of producing this CampHacker episode. Seth Hauser, Andy Lyon, you two have been longtime supporters of the show, and we wanted to thank you for letting your awesome out, Camp Mavericks. We hope that the two of you and everyone out there enjoys the CampHacker show.
Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I'm a summer camp marketing and strategy consultant, and I help summer camps translate what they do so more families insist on sending their kids to summer camp.
Hi, my name is Dan Weir. I'm the Director of Camping Services here at Frost Valley YMCA. Frost Valley is a year-round camp conference education facility up in the Catskill Mountains, New York. We're about 2.5 hours from Manhattan. And this was my 21st summer of working here this past summer.
And my name is Gabrielle Rail. I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Woro. Camp Woro is an all-girls camp situated in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive, safe community for girls in both French and English.
Hi, I'm Amanda Grassick. I'm the camp director at Easter Seals Camp Woodeden. We're one of 2 summer camps run by Easter Seals Ontario, and we provide overnight summer camp services for campers, youth and young adults living with physical disabilities.
Amanda, welcome to CampHacker. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, Amanda, how did your camp journey start?
Yeah, my camp journey started with my parents, actually. They started dating at camp in the early 70s, and my brother and I like to say that we never really had a chance to escape from that. That was kind of the foundation of their relationship. So I started attending camp in Alberta, a YMCA camp called Camp Chief Hector, when I was 6 years old. And I had one summer I decided to be a real adult and not come back to camp. And that lasted about 2.5 weeks. And then I took a job as a janitor at a camp to get back into the swing of things. So I've been involved in camping working for about 22 years now, and have traveled all over the country. And it's been a wonderful experience, yeah.
And you have that awesome privilege of raising your family at camp too. Yeah.
I met my wife at a camp, which is wonderful. And, it was kind of one of those things where I already knew so much about her from seeing her interact with high needs kids. I kind of had a quick snapshot into what she would be like, in difficult situations, and certainly raising children. And since we've moved to Woodeden, it's been wonderful. I'll be at my 7:30 a.m. Senior staff meeting in the morning, and both my kids, my dog, and my wife will walk by on their daily walk around the property. So it's been a pretty wonderful experience. Yeah.
That's amazing. Amanda, for you, what was you had this moment when you didn't go to camp and you missed it and fought to get back, but was there a particular moment in your camp story that it was the time you said to yourself, I am camp for life?
Yeah, and that happened in 2001. I had been growing up at a camp in Alberta and working there, and had left a little bit because I was an angry teenager and didn't like some changes that were happening at camp. In hindsight, they were good changes, but as a 19-year-old, I was pretty angry about them. Yeah. But a big part of that too is, I figured I was queer, I figured I was trans, and it wasn't something that was supported at the camp I was at. Yep. So I went to YMCA Camp Elphinstone, ran by the Vancouver Y, and the camp director, Duncan Dixon, took me aside a couple days into staff training and said, you know, Amanda, it's okay if you're queer here, and it's okay if you talk to your campers about it, because your queer campers are going to want to have a role model. And that was kind of the first time I really felt wholly included at camp. And I just, you know, that summer was really foundational in terms of like helping me understand the power that camp had, and how it could be like a saving place for campers.
Yes, a saving place. I'm with you. Well, welcome. We're so grateful that you're here, and glad to have your perspective on this issue, your camp director perspective on this issue. So we're talking today about staff mental health, and we're going to rely on Matt to come up with a good snazzy title for this, attention-getting title for this, but it's a serious topic, and it's been something that Dan's been very vocally advocating for recently, both in summer camp professionals, in his professional wildlife, and in his role as the Tri-State Conference Chair. And I think it's something that we've all seen. Certainly, this group has had lots of discussions at the end of the summers about how it's changing in our staff, in our campers. And we don't want to open up the discussion too much, but really want to focus on staff and how that's affecting and changing our role as camp directors. So Dan, is there anything in particular that has made this a hot button issue for you?
Yeah, so thank you for that as well too. It's funny, you know, I think we're at this crux right now where 20 years ago, when operating camps, we didn't think we needed a camp nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think every camp definitely has a nurse, if not has doctors at their camps. And I think we're at the same part with mental health, where we're saying we know this is going beyond our scope of what we can do with camp staff, but we're not sure about how to do it. And I think 20 years from now, every camp will have a mental health professional. I think that's the trend and rate we're going. A horrible statistic. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for teens after accidents. That's the extreme example. I'm talking to our alumni and several people work in schools, and they're just adding mental health counselors and licensed clinical social workers and other professionals pretty rapidly right now in schools. And if you look at what our kids are facing, both our campers and our staff, it's pretty staggering. You have the pressures of life. You have people entering student debt immediately and not buying homes. We're seeing that effect in society. And then we have people worried about people coming into their schools and hurting them. You know, and I think when we get a child, for 9 months of the year, they're being supported with different services through the school. And then when they come to camp and they don't have access to those services as easily, or if you're remote like I am, you can't just pop down to a clinic easily, it really makes it hard. So all this is happening in our society. And meanwhile, as I talk to camp professionals, being on the Tri-State Chair, I do call a few people when I go to conferences. I ask them what are they worried about, what their concerns are. Mental health is definitely the first one that comes up. And for a lot of people, it's a few things. One is they might not have the skill set or the knowledge, but they do have the skill set and knowledge. It's just the amount of time that goes into it. I mean, when you're working with somebody that needs that much development or needs that much support, it really takes up a lot of time, and it's not something to mess around with. The consequences are severe. So for me, I recognize I'm in I'm in a position of privilege right now where I'm holding the megaphone, for lack of better words. So I'm just using that megaphone very loudly on this issue and making sure people understand the importance of it and taking it seriously. It also changes by state. Some states have some different resources. I'm not familiar how Canada's handling it as well too, but that topic-wise, it's something where I think 20 years now, when we look back on camping, we're going to be like, wow, I don't know how we got through that time period. It'll be a very clear answer, but right now it's something where people need to be advocating. And we talk to insurance companies, they're pushing the same way, and they're often seeing the trends as well too. So that is why I've kind of taken it on this issue as a whole, and really have been banging the drum about it. So.
Right. Amanda, when we were talking about having you on a show, one of this was an issue that was close to something that you were describing. What are some of the things that are coming into your awareness as a director at a camp these days?
Yeah, so I think Dan's exactly right that, 20 years ago, we didn't really think about mental health in terms of campers, and it's certainly not in terms of staff, right? As a counselor, I worked with staff that had diagnosed mental health concerns, but they were all like fairly stable and had good control of their mental health when they were at camp. And I don't think that trend is continuing in such a way that it used to be. So, I mean, we're seeing a lot more staff come in with general anxiety. We're seeing a lot more staff come in without the tools to handle their mental health. A lot more staff coming in who have never been away from home and don't know, they're not registering their stuff for university. Their parents are registering them for university, or their family's the one like filling out their staff application, even if like we put steps in place to try to catch that. And so by the time staff get to camp, it's just so overwhelming for them to be in a place where they don't have their normal supports and they haven't learned how to lean on themselves, I guess. So it's something that is pretty concerning. There was a kind of a perfect storm at my camp last year in terms of I was the new director. We only had 6 returning staff out of 67. And because of the physical abilities of our campers and how much personal care we have to put into making sure they're safe and supported and can be engaged, that means that campers that need someone to do full care on them can't function as that staff member the next year. So we're not raising our own staff team. So many of our staff come in and have never worked at a camp before at all, let alone a facility like ours. And we saw 10 staff in the first 6 days quit with very short notice, and all of them mentioned it was just too much for them. There was anxiety. I mean, some of them, we had conversations half an hour before their parents showed up, and they said they were doing great, right? And then a car pulls into the parking lot, and so we're just, it was really a struggle to try to support the staff that were having a hard time with their mental health, and also the staff that were picking up the load for those people that weren't able to stay. So, we're working really hard this year to try to put systems in place to catch that stuff early. So some of the things we're doing, all our staff supervisors are getting certified in mental health first aid this year. We have a social worker on call who used to work at camp and is a registered social worker right now and comes in 2 days a week. They're going to be supervising a social work student who's going to be working with us as well. So there'll be someone there all weekdays. And we're actually really fortunate that we're technically within the city limits of London, Ontario. So we have access to a 24-hour crisis line in hospitals that other folks don't have access to. But we're trying to build like a multi-stage system. So, our staff supervisors can catch like emergencies through mental health first aid as quickly as possible, and then funnel them to the right person, whether that's the social worker or some outside help as well.
Right. Thank you. What a crazy first summer.
Yeah, and over we have 67 staff positions, and 27 staff didn't finish their contracts last year. So, right. Yeah, it was pretty intense. I didn't see a lot of camp. I was doing a lot of hiring through the summer.
And I mean, this is the story I'm hearing from a lot of camp directors, is that they're asking how do you not only strategically plan to keep camp going, but how do you support people that are going through this?
Yeah, and Gab, I promise I want to check in with you. It's part of the opening, but I must say that watching the camp community with this unique perspective that we have through summer camp professionals, it is, and going to so many conferences and speaking at so many conferences, it is amazing to me how much rage this is giving to camp directors. That they're just angry at people. They're angry at their staff. They're angry at staff's parents. They're just so frustrated. I get it. Everything is changing so fast. But I wanted this to be a discussion that helps us get to a point where there's less anger in the industry at the people that we love and trust that have done this job for us. So, At WorldGov, has there been something that has changed the way you folks are dealing with staff and mental health and anxiety, et cetera?
I think I like what you're talking about in the sense of anger. I think that, a lot of the times anger comes from something that we don't have control over, and we wish it just wasn't there. And usually it comes from a place of care. We care about people, and we kind of just wish they didn't feel so poorly or crappy or whatever. And or we wish that parents, stopped harming their kids by overprotecting, and sort of that anger. I really sympathize with it. I think for us, really, it's looking at societal pressures or societal construct versus medical, and sort of making sure, and of course they can overlap with each other. But what we're looking at is the intense pressures, internal pressures, and internal self-talk that our young women are facing, and the realities of that they're just not good enough. They're not good enough to express how they feel because they should be able to handle it. They're not good enough at their job, so they don't ask for help. They're not good enough physically. They're not good enough intellectually, et cetera, et cetera. And that's something that we're inheriting from our society. And as camp directors, we do not have, and I think this is where camp directors have a misconception that we create this safe little space for our staff and our campers, and then everything's going to be great and lovely. We inherit the societal norms, and so it's looking at those norms and saying, and then being transparent with our staff to start with. What are our struggles today? What are we individually fighting against and fighting for, and sort of opening up that conversation, and then also being open and honest about stress and anxiety and negative self-talk, and how and providing them with the tools of shifting that. We've started doing journaling in the sense of actually acknowledging the things that they're proud of that they did that day, as much as how little that is, because what we've noticed is that there's such a high negative self-talk that anxiety just builds and builds and builds. We've also created a curriculum so that it shows them this. We can actually show them a lot of our staff need proof. Michael Brandwein talks about, specifics terrific, and he's right in the sense of you can't just tell somebody you're doing a great job. You need to explain why. We've created a curriculum so that they can physically see the steps that they're growing as an individual, and that the work that they're putting in is paying off. But I think the other part that Amanda was talking about is having a social worker. We also have a social worker on call. As camp directors, we can't take on, we're not experts in the field of psychiatry, and we're not experts. Some camp directors are social workers, but that's a lovely combo pack, but not all of us are. And we have to recognize where our expertise lies. And our expertise lies in staff training, in giving the tools to staff that they need to support their campers, developing a good program, making sure the septic system is emptied. Like that's our job. But beyond that, we cannot be the ones that are in charge of, or pretending to know how to handle somebody that actually needs medical attention and care.
Yeah.
I think right, like so many things a camp director wouldn't say fix it, but it's like, oh, we'll figure it out. You have this attitude like we can do it, and then this is the topic where you don't really mess around, and you can't just throw candy at it or throw hugs at it. It's a much more complicated in terms of support.
And it's taking it seriously, right? Like I think the thing is that what's difficult when somebody's struggling to the point where you can't assist them is that you can't actually physically see it. If somebody's bleeding, if they are diagnosed with diabetes, etc., that's still in our society that it seems to be taken more seriously and real. And we wouldn't pretend to know exactly what to do in these situations. We consult with a physician. But when it comes to mental health, and extreme struggles, we're still in a place where we don't take it serious enough to say this person needs more than just me. And I think that's where camp directors, we have to learn the lines and doing the Amanda, what was it called? First aid?
Mental health first aid.
Starting there, just so you understand where that line is very important.
Yeah, I like to, Gabs, I think you're absolutely right that, we like to think that camp's a safe bubble, and it's not, right? And we can't really control what staff and campers come into camp with, but to a certain extent, like, we can help to control that they're leaving with something positive, right? So I think there's going to be a shift in the industry away from seeing, we talk about transferable skills in terms of like hard skills and that kind of stuff, but I think there's going to be a shift where folks are starting to really take a look at how to build transferable skills in terms of like grit and resiliency and mental health support in staff. And I think that will help deal with part of like the anger and the rage that's happening when it becomes just part of your everyday thinking that how am I going to help staff develop resiliency today? I always like to tell the first time I see a staff member who has a parent or a guardian or a family member get really mad at them and use some pretty extreme language or use some pretty extreme behavior tactics to try to get what they want, I always take that staff member aside and say, it's not personal, it might feel personal, but you have to understand that this is a behavior that has gotten this person what they need for a big part of their life. And so when you're seeing staff who can't deal with the rigors of camp or putting up walls and not being able to engage or resigning pretty quickly, like, I talk to staff the same way, that like, this is a behavior that's kept them emotionally and physically safe. And we might not understand it and it might feel personal, but it's not. And how can we help this person develop other skills and other behavior patterns that will get them to the same place that might be more pro-social or fit into our culture a little bit better? And that has been pretty effective at helping people see that, they might have a parent screaming at them, but it has nothing to do about them, right? That's something that parent has used their entire life to meet their needs. And like, how do we shift that, right?
So I don't want to spend a time on this, but I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to illustrate or from the three of you, from the work that you've done on this topic, why is it, Dan alluded to this, but let's spend 2 minutes or 4 minutes on this real specifically. Why are staff more stressed, anxious, and have mental health issues that are closer to the surface today than before?
I mean, I think partially it's just recognizing, I mean, I don't know, I think Lethal Weapon was out the first one was out in like the late 80s or something like that. And I remember watching it. My family is all, during the summer it's all girls, and then during the winter it's guy movies. So Lethal Weapon, basically, Mel Gibson's character, he loses his wife, and that's where we start off the movie. And he's paired with Danny Glover, and nobody wants to work with Mel Gibson because he's crazy. That's a term that they use. They're just like, he's crazy and he's a crazy guy. And really what he's suffering from is the loss of his wife, and he's very upset and he's hurting. But I remember rewatching this movie just recently this Christmas, and that was the terminology. So I think in one place there was anxiety. We just weren't looking at it. We were looking more at people we were calling staff that were shy or hidden away. They're maybe probably suffering from anxiety, but we were mislabeling it. So I think that's one. But two, for me, it's definitely, which I've talked about before, it's how much media our staff members are receiving and absorbing, and it's gone up 150%. And I think it's about 15 years, 150% of information that people are absorbing. And it's that's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and it's a lot of helplessness. And when you don't have power or you don't know where you have power, that can cause a lot of anxiety. And then, as Dan said, our staff won't have probably the future that their parents had, houses, security, and jobs. So there's this misexpectation from parents that are putting on pressure that you need to hit where I'm at. And our young adults are like, I can't, but I'm going to try to, but I don't know how. And the amount of conversations I've had with staff, just even last night, I had a conversation with a staff member talking about her parents. And she really believed that and I think her parents are very kind in a way, but the amount of pressure that they're putting on her, for her, she doesn't realize yet it's unbearable, but the way she's talking to me, it's unbearable. Mm-hmm. And it's just being pumped into her.
Yeah. And that exact topic is what the keynote is about, is the pressures that parents are putting on children, and the myths that we have with our kids. Like one of the ones she really talks about is like how every parent is like so stressed about making sure their kids are happy, but by doing that, they're making them unhappy. So, yeah, it's something where I don't think enough people understand that this youth is having different pressures than just 10 years ago. Even 5 years ago, if you look at how social media has changed things compared to now, it's just
Yeah, I think media does play a big part of it, and I just there's lots of studies that talk about violence and violent crime and kidnappings and that kind of thing have actually really decreased over the past 30, 40 years. But because that's what we hear about in the media, the world seems much more dangerous, right? So it's not the same place as when I grew up. I used to go into my back alley with the neighborhood kids and like come out 8 hours later, and my parents were totally cool with that. Yeah. And nowadays, like you see a 9-year-old kid like walking 10 blocks to school by themselves, and people are upset about it. And it was in that 8 hours that hanging out with my friends that I learned that like if I fell out of a tree and wasn't that badly hurt, that I could brush it off. Or like if I was having a conflict with one of my friends, like my family wasn't there to immediately like deal with it, right? Like we started working through that kind of stuff. So I think I think we're at the stage where like kids aren't necessarily left to their own devices in a way that helps them develop those skills early on and learn what healthy risk is and learn how to build that resiliency. And and so by the time we see kids at camp and we see staff members, they just don't know how to keep themselves happy and get themselves back on track, right? And and I think a big part of it, like I love my phone and I love being in touch with the world, and I read the news till 11:30 at night, but I have the skills to deal with that because I developed them as a kid. And I think a lot of our our campers nowadays, and certainly our staff members, haven't developed those skills. And I think how hard it is for me to like read about tragedies that are happening, and how upset I am, and how it takes me a time to like unplug and deal with it and do some mental health work myself. But I have that experience and I've been taught how to do that. But I have to remind myself that if I'm struggling with something that is happening in the world, like my 18-year-old staff are probably struggling with it too, but don't know how to support themselves or where to ask for help or how to ask for help, right?
Mm-hmm. Gab, you look like you had something else you wanted to say.
I was just saying that I was just thinking that our schedule at camp is just getting more and more, it's just tighter and tighter and tighter, because our staff are having a harder and harder time with free play, and so are our campers. Our home loneliness is going up during that free time, and our staff don't seem to have the skills on how to encourage campers to do free play. I met my best friend during buddy swim. We hated each other at first, but then, she did an awesome dolphin dive, and I was like, wait a minute, best friends? And she was like, yes. So that was during free play. And we're looking at our schedule now to see where we can actually make our schedule less, because subconsciously, we're trying to support our campers and our staff. And what we've actually done is just kind of replicate what's going on outside of camp, which is this high structure, and it is fueled a little bit by anxiety ourselves. So now we're trying to sort of look at where we can loosen up our schedule and make it a little bit less pressure, less intense, get to point A to point B, and be okay with the upsetness, be okay with the quote unquote boredom, and use that as a sort of, as Amanda was saying, build resilience.
Yeah. So, Gab, you had some solid ideas, some things that you're doing almost on the daily to give your staff some tools. I wonder if others have some tools that they're giving their staff. And I don't mean training sessions. Let's make sure we cover that. But is there daily stuff that you're giving, or tools you're giving your staff to do with things in a day?
I would say the two biggest that we're doing is we have a sheet made up of local free resources. So, for instance, we have where the free clinic is and their hours, where a phone number they could call, a few different resources for the area that our county is providing. And I have it posted in the staff lounge and a few other areas where staff congregate. So they don't have to come to their supervisor when they are having a concern or want to have privacy with what they're experiencing. And then the other that we've been doing is really just doing our best to really respect time off in terms of if someone's asking for it, to do our best to give it to them. And to, instead of assume, often we assume the worst as managers that, oh, why do you need this time off, or you're using this time off the wrong way. Instead, saying, okay, we'll work with you, we'll roll with it, and figuring it out, and then keeping an eye on it. If it becomes habitual, maybe that person needs more support rather than to be having harder conversation.
Thanks.
Yeah, and some things we're doing is we're having, I mean, this year we have many more returning staff than we had last year, which is wonderful. And we're having them reach out to the new staff coming in, particularly. We have a very high percentage of international staff because we're not growing our own counselors in-house. And so we're having, returning staff that are from Ireland reach out to the folks from Ireland who are coming so that they have some other support system by the time they get there. They've had, 2 or 3 conversations with those returning staff. And that's kind of twofold, right? That's to help the new staff who come in to be able to, have someone safe and comfortable to talk to who's not their direct supervisor. But it's also a way that we're hoping to develop our returning staff to develop some of those competencies in terms of, being able to have difficult decisions and being able to support other folks and being able to build, their skills and techniques in themselves to be resilient and be gritty. So that by the time they arrive, we've kind of benefited both of those populations of folks, the incoming staff and the returning staff. And similar to what Dan said, we post information about, where they can access free help in the area, how they can get there. And our we're blessed here that we have registered nurses on site. And all the scheduling that goes through, if a staff member wants to schedule a meeting with the social worker, then they talk to the nurse, and all that information is held confidential. Like, I don't even know, if I find it infuriating sometimes. I'm like, is Jim going to be back at work? And they're like, I can't really talk to you about it. You'll have to talk to Jim about it. But, we're really clear in staff training throughout the summer that if you talk to a nurse, it's confidential. If you schedule an interview with or a meeting with a social worker, it's confidential. And all that happens on like our scheduled break time. So it's not like that staff members can be missed in the middle of like high ropes, and it's going to be noticed. And I think that's gone a long way, just to really talk about how confidential those conversations are and about how they're not getting to, their supervisor or to me, unless of course there's like a safety issue. But other than that, that's, it's confidential information. I think that's really helping folks to feel safe. And also hopefully, if this is the first time they're talking to someone that's like a professional that can help with mental health, getting that, understanding what that process looks like in like a fairly safe environment. So if they need to access a mental health professional outside of camp, they've had a taste of what it might look like and how it feels, right? And that's
yeah. Yeah, that sounds really important too. Gab, is there other stuff that you would add that you folks are doing on the daily, or other resources available that you haven't talked about?
No, I think I think basically it is educating yourself as much as possible and getting support where you can, and
Yeah.
that's the number one thing as a camp director, is to go from there.
Yeah.
Mm.
I must say this is it's odd. It's a hard time to be a young adult. It's a hard time to be a camp director, and I think that all of those feelings of frustration that people are expressing are part of that. And I hope that everyone listening is seeking their own support or developing their own support. I think that this job is only going to get harder. It becomes more pressure on us as directors because we see the value of what we offer at camp, and this place where we can offer skills and a listening ear to campers and young staff, but we need to make sure we're developing that in ourselves as well, in our own support. So I think that's an important thing to make sure we say today. This topic is so big. There's a couple things I want to cover, and then we may have to sort of cap it off. But Amanda, can you talk about where you folks found the mental health first aid and just a quick description of what that looks like, what it is?
Yeah, of course. So it's the Canadian Mental Health Foundation. I believe there's a bunch of different organizations that all have very similar acronyms. But if you search mental health first aid in Canada, you'll get a list. You'll get a list of instructors and courses. So you can look up on like one central website who's offering courses, and also if there's an instructor in your area. So what we did last year and what we're doing again this year is we're bringing in an instructor to run the program at our camp. Mental Health First Aid is a 2-day program. You can add an additional like 2 hours onto it to specialize in, if your staff are working with like Indigenous populations, or we're this year having someone to come and instruct mental health first aid for adults that interact with youth. And it's got another module added to it that's mostly eating disorders that's added.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to standard first aid in that, you're taught an acronym that you use to diagnose how, not a mental health disorder, but how serious something is, and like when you need to get help and how you can push people there. It costs generally, it depends on the instructor, but between $100 and $120. All in for the instruction and the manual and stuff for an individual. And it was like one of the lifesavers we had last year with our high staff turnovers, having all our senior staff and our counseling, our cabin leaders have that, made a huge difference in our ability to continue to function last year.
Yeah.
We were, down a sixth of our staff team for a good chunk of the summer. So.
There's also a website too, mentalhealthfirstaid.org. I think it's more US based, but with YouTube courses. And you can find instructors. Like one of our year-round staff took it, and then we're actually in talks with somebody right now to see if they can teach it, bring staff training again to our senior staff.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, great. Well, it's okay. So we've talked around the topic. We've talked around some of the things you would do. What would be, Deanne? What would be your advice to a camp director who's becoming more aware of this, more concerned? Hopefully, hasn't had a crisis yet, but wants to make sure they're ahead of these things and do better at looking after. In this case, we're talking today about the staff in particular.
Yeah, I would first encourage the coursework that Amanda's been speaking about. I would also encourage speaking to whoever sanctions your camp. So for U.S. camps, for New York State, for instance, Department of Health, they will be a good starting ground to learn what you legally can do in your state as well too. For instance, New York State, I can't legally hire an LCSW, but there's some other things I can do. So I would talk to those. I would look at that course. I would talk to whoever sanctions you. I also talk to your insurance. I was at a presentation with Ann Skyer not too long ago, and they are very much on top of it in terms of making sure that camps are taking this topic seriously. And so your insurance should have some good information of where to direct you as well too.
Right. What's LCSW? SW, I get a social work. What's LC?
It's a licensed clinical social worker.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thanks,
Yeah,
Ken.
and in Canada, I would say to talk to your local school board because I think
Mm,
they're a little bit ahead of the curve on this and might have both the resources and also potentially a social worker that's interested in coming out to camp a day a week
right.
kind of thing or being on call. Um, just in my experience, they've started kind of integrating mental health over the past 5 years and are a little bit ahead of us in terms of what kind of support you can offer and what it might look like.
Mm, excellent. Thanks. Gab, what advice would you give to people who want to get ahead of this?
I think it's in my tool of the week.
Yeah.
So I can go right into that if you wanted to, or
Well, let's hold on to that, and
yeah,
obviously we'll get to the tool of the week. But
perfect.
um, I so we have all these things that we are doing on site in the summer, all incredibly important to help to provide a the best service possible um, to our campers. I have one other thing that is, I mean, it's very personal to me. It's because I have clinical depression, and I have always found that the hardest points for me, especially, and this is when I was before, I feel like this is a thing that I have control of now. I didn't when I was a young adult. And um, and my hardest times are when I came home from camp. My hardest times ever. That was certainly when I was first diagnosed. It's been times that I've been in care of a psychologist have all been in the fall after camp. And for me, it was this feeling of I was empowered, I was in control, people trusted in me, and then all of a sudden I went back to being a student. And that, along with whatever the chemistry aspect of that is, it's just incredibly hard for me in the fall. And um, so I wonder from each of you, do you have or are you thinking about what the aftercare looks like for our staff, let alone not just the ones who've had to leave early, but the ones who who are there and have to make a transition back to either being back in the bubble that their parents put them in, or then going out on their own, being away at school and having to deal with lots of things without the support of a camp director who's thoughtful and kind about these things. What are your thoughts, or what have you been thinking about what after the summer looks like for you?
I think for us, it's actually asking the staff what they want and letting them uh, build that support and us supporting that support, if that's not too much inception. But I think every year is a different year. And if it comes from them, I feel, again, I like to talk about power a little bit, but if you can give them that power of conversation and suggestion and see what they actually want, I've been finding that's been very useful. 2 years ago, I opened up my house to people on Sundays that wanted to come by, and we would cook together, we'd watch American football together. But really, it was a place that people knew that the door was open once a week, for a family dinner, and that came from staff members and group gatherings, or just even a check-in, 2 weeks after from the director and leadership team members. But asking them has been our latest thing that I've really enjoyed.
Thanks, Gab.
Yeah, in terms of supporting folks that are heading back to school, like college or university, something when I worked for the Diabetes Canada running camps for kids with type 1, things we would always tell campers and staff that were going into university for the first time was to register with their disability services group on campus immediately, even if they didn't think they had ever needed help before or might not need help, because when you have a persistent low the morning of an exam, you can't possibly sit it because you can't sit up and you're worried you might have to go to the hospital. That's not the time to try to figure out how to get help, right? So we do similar things with staff that have been talking to social workers or staff that have been talking to supervisors about their concerns, or even just talking about anxiety in general, is asking them, have you registered with disability services? This is what it looks like. Do you need help talking? Do you need help finding those resources before you leave camp? Because kind of the hardest time to get help is when you need it immediately, right? And if you're already in the system and you know what it might look like and you can access that stuff immediately, you don't have to go through the registration process. I find that has helped our staff be set up for success in the year round. Because I think, Travis, you're right, the transition is one of the hardest things for staff. Certainly for me, it was really hard to leave camp every summer.
Yep.
Yeah. For us, we really focus on debriefing with the staff. So when the staff leave, we set up conversations on to debrief how their summer went, and also talk about going forward into the next summer. So that's and just keeping in touch on social media. Like, we'll keep the momentum going, and we find stuff for lost and found, or we do something's funny. We'll keep our staff group that we had from the previous summer still going. Those are the two things that we do. I feel like with our network, we personally know how people are doing, and it's just being intentional, making sure we're following up when we hear somebody struggling.
Yeah. And I don't want to argue. I don't want to sound like I'm arguing with that, Dan. I just want people to think about the fact that this is one of those aspects of our job that we can't necessarily systematize and toolitize, and it can't be a spreadsheet thing. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying at all. What I'm cautious about is the face that people are putting out on social media being their perfect self versus whatever's going. And so I
cropping out the sadness is, I think, was Portlandia's kid.
Yeah. So I think that check-ins are great and personal messages are great. And I heard this story third hand, and so I don't know who to give credit for it, but I know it was a camp director who of a girls' camp who was really after her staff to private message her on Instagram, and it was often questions like, show me what you're eating. Like, I want to know that you're eating well. Show me what you're doing, where your meditation space is, where you're finding that, when you found 5 minutes to meditate, or, just plain simple mindfulness, then let's do that. So I think that we can use the tools that are available to us to make that connection strong and get past the front of social media, using social media. So I think that there's some awesome tools in there. One of the things that we ran out of time to do when we were directing, but it was something that we'd always wanted to do, was have alumni check in or introduce themselves to staff when they show up in their town. They go away to college in this town and there's alumni there, then that alumni would just at least raise their hand and say, hey, I'm here if you want to talk about how camp went. I'd love to hear how your summer was. Not really putting any pressure on them to do it, but just let them know that there's someone who's been through the same thing that they were going through in that transition. And so we did do that as well as we could. We also had connection and resources from being a Presbyterian church camp that we could connect people with congregations in their new communities that could be a check-in. I think that's less effective. In our specific camp, that's less effective these days, just because of the pressures that individuals in leadership in congregational ministry are under. There's just not a lot of pressure to take on doing that as well as they'd like to. So it's one of those things I'd love to be the role of alumni. I've talked in my alumni presentation about how we need to train staff that they will become alumni and that there are continued responsibilities there. And without adding pressure to them, it's just like, we hope that you're going to be the person who'll be available when people go to college in London, Ontario, that you're going to be the person that will at least say hello to them once in a while. And I think that we can use other tools like Bonjoro, which is one of my tools of the week from this year, to just send messages to say, I'm thinking about you. If you need anything, please reach out. Please don't feel like you're doing this alone, etc. So there's a few things you can do. Well, that was heavy. But I appreciate your honesty. Gab, did you have something you wanted to say to wrap up?
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.